Okay. So this is my Eliet Major chipper, and today I'm going to give it a treat of a new set of blades which I discovered it desperately needs. The Eliet is very easy to get at once you've read the instructions, which I now have. And the first job is to remove the front legs, or in the case of this one, the front towing axle or steerable axle, which is an assembly I made to make it much easier to move about the place. So I will now remove that, and then we'll proceed to look at the internals where the cutters are. Now, a thoughtful part of the design of the Eliet is that with the front wheels or legs removed, you can cock it over onto its nose or the handle, which gives you good access to where we need to go now, where the blades are. I've already removed the cover. You'll notice I've written blades M13. I do that on a lot of my bits of equipment. It just reminds me which spanner I need to get before I start the job, and these blades are all held on with M13, and we'll get to those in a minute. Let's go and see what we've got in the box of blades that I've just taken delivery of. Right, so here's the box of blades. These are very sharp, and these are genuine blades. These are not look-alikes, but that edge is very sharp, unlike the ones that I'm about to replace, which are not. Also in the package they've given us replacement bolts and nuts. Not a bad idea. The handbook does recommend that you change them. I think probably it's the nuts that are the bigger problem, because they're nylock self-locking nuts, and after a few removals chances are they won't hold as well. But there we go. I haven't counted them yet, but this is our plan to change all of these. And yeah, the word Eliet is stamped in them, and I'm fairly confident that the company I bought them from, they are the right blades. They are reversible, but as the instructions tell you, you need to reverse them in a certain way, which is where the problems in my current machine setup are being discovered, because whoever put the blades in didn't follow the instructions, and I'm certain that these are going to work a lot better than the ones that are coming out. So now I'm going to remove the first set of blades. Okay, so I've taken the bolts, all the bolts out of the first set. It seems to be easier to release the blades if you do that. Also have here some suede gloves. If the existing blades are very sharp, just want to be a bit careful, because you could easily cut yourself. But in this case, just pulls out like that, and that's the blade. And what you can see is that the nose is fairly rounded, and the reason is, and if you look on the right hand side, that this has been ground quite a lot, and not even ground well, because if you look at the surface, it's actually wedged. I think probably they sharpened these in situ with an angle grinder, which is a quick fix, but long term it's not the best thing to do to a machine like this. The other thing to notice, looking at the right hand side and looking at this blade here, is that we can see the serrated side. That blade is fitted incorrectly. The two outer ones, as we'll come to when we fit the new blades, that side of the blade, the ground side, should be facing towards the middle on both sides, from both sides. On the diagram they call these A. If you've got a machine which has only got 3 blades, the same thing applies. I've got 5 sets of blades here, you may actually only have 3, but the 2 outer ones, the chamfered side faces that way, and that is incorrect, and in fact I'm fairly certain the others are too. Not good. It's all part of the design of the machine, and apparently they should both face inwards, and if someone's gone to the trouble to actually put that in the instructions, they had a darn good reason at some point. So I'm going to now take all the blades out of this one, and in fact I'm going to finish the job by taking them all out, and then we'll look at putting the new blades in. Point I should have mentioned earlier, do make sure that the engine is switched off, and for safety I would unplug the spark plug, and there's no way it could fire at all. The handle, which you should have with your machine, it's amazing, a lot of people have a handle and they don't realise what it's there for. It's permanently fixed on the other side with a wing nut. You can use that to rotate the blades. So you put it in the hole on the side, and assuming I can do this one-handed, it's got a spring in it. That's for safety purposes, so that it won't ever stay on. And okay, dropped it. This is obviously a bit of video that I need to edit later, but there we go. I've put it on, and it will allow me to rotate the stack of blades over like that. Probably a little bit safer than using your fingers if you've not got gloves on, because these blades, well, should be sharp, and the new ones going in will be. So next time you see this, it'll have no blades on it at all, and then we can discuss the correct way to fit the new blades into the machine. Something I better add at this point, before you tip it onto its nose, it's best that you make sure there's not too much fuel in the tank, otherwise it may start to drip out of the breather. In my case I'm about a quarter full, but if your tank was full you may find yourself dripping petrol, which is never a good idea. Okay, so that's all of the blades removed. I did find that if you undid all of the bolts from each section before removing the blades, that they seem to be a little bit easy to remove. Whether the metal springs a little bit, I don't know, but I did find that in this particular instance. So there we are, we're ready to put new blades in. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to line the old blades up to show you well, what you might find if your blades are a little bit poor. Well, here they are. in my case 20 blades, and quite a motley collection. If you look at the profiles, they're really they're all worn. What I've done here, I've laid a blade on one of the replacements. Just try and get a better angle contrast for you, and tell you what, I'll put it on a slightly non-reflective surface. Hopefully this will do the biz. And what I want you to see is the difference in the profile between the replacements. They've clearly been ground just to there, which probably means they tried to grind them in situ. And the other thing is, a genuine part, which in fact, there we go, is what I'm using, has stamped in it the maker's name, Eliet. I've cleaned this one up on a wire brush, and there is nothing. So they are lookalikes, you might say. And on the back, there's a difference. The rear profile is much coarser on a genuine one than certainly on these. I didn't fit the ones that I've just removed, so I can't say for certain that they weren't manufacturer's originals, but I can't believe that they would go to the trouble to stamp their name in it and not use the same blades in a new machine. So there you go. So these are pretty much shot. I might save them in case I actually break one, but they are really not, make sure you can focus on that, they really are not very good at all. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take my box of new blades and start to reassemble it, at which point I'm going to show you the correct orientation of the blades. Before I get to fit the blades, I just thought I would show you this diagram. If you've only got 3 blades, then this section B is just 1 blade wide. This is in the manual. The manuals are easily downloadable off the web, and I'll put the links at the bottom for anybody that can't find them. And in the instructions, the 2 zones marked A and A, the beveled edge of the blade faces towards the centre of the machine. Now I'm going to hold the blade up. That's the bevel edge. That's the smooth, shiny edge there. And obviously there are 2 of them because these are replaceable blades. So that is not the beveled edge. That is. And in the manual, they clearly say that these, the bevels face that way, and these, the bevel faces that way. The interesting part of the manual, which I did ring a dealer up to double check, as you can see, these blades are mounted at different angles on the assembly. And in the manual it says that the bevel should face the axis, and I wasn't certain what they really were talking about, and I think that what they really mean is that is the axis. So the bevel, whichever one of these blades you're fitting in the B section, the bevel, if you were to draw a line, it's pointing towards the axis here. So in this case here, if I was putting the blade in there, that would be wrong. That would be right, so that bevel is pointing towards that axis. The action is patented, so it's probably part of their patent process, but the gentleman I spoke to at the dealer said that the crucial ones were the outer ones, A, and when I've put them in, I will mark the blades and show you what they look like. He said B was less critical, but obviously they've said what they've said for a reason in the manual. So the bevel section, if you were to draw a little perpendicular line from the face, is pointing towards the axle, and that'll become a little bit more obvious when I start to put them in. So I'm going to do the left hand A first, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's installed. Right, we've now installed the left hand side of what they call the A section, and you will see the bevel there, there, and there is pointing to the left. Now, in putting these in, I did have to, so the camera will focus automatically again, did have a few bits of grief. Okay, sorry for the camera shake. If we look at the floor now, you will see a selection of tools which I ended up using. Right, this is a torque wrench. In the book they say tighten the nuts to 25 newton meters. That's about 18.5 foot-pounds in old money. This is a smaller torque wrench. It was almost impossible to get it on anywhere. Here's an ordinary ratchet. Looks like the stock thing to use, but the thing you have to be careful of is on the sockets. If you only lift off a small amount, particularly on these shallow heads on these bolts, this can easily spin off. And what I ended up using was one of these. So this is I don't know what the proper name is, but it's a ratchet wrench completely through. They will sit flush and they do not slip off the nut, and they don't give you any grief. And on the other side, use a ring spanner like that. Now, I also found it useful to have a large screwdriver. And what I use that for is occasionally these were a little tight to go in, and what you'll find is there's just a little bit of ease you can get, just a little bit of twist. You don't need a lot of force, just a little bit of twist just will help the new blades go in. And lastly, this. It's a soft face mallet. It's hide on one side, copper on the other. And what I did is I put the blades as close as I could on the axis. In other words, they're going to go straight in. And if they were a little bit, shall we say, resistant, a few light taps on the top, in fact you can just see the marks there, just to get it to line up with the first hole. Once you've got the bolt in the first hole, if you're not quite lined up for the second one, then you can tap this very slightly one side or the other and pivot the blade so that in fact you can get the next bolt in. So there's the first row. They're all pointing the right way, and I have to say it's a bit scary tightening up, because you're very aware that if you slip you could gash yourself and you could be visiting A&E. So put the gloves on, it'll give you quite a bit of protection, and just use flat ends of ring spanners rather than trying to use a ratchet. I'm not saying you can't use a ratchet. If you've got a socket that's actually got no recess at the entry, you might, but I felt more comfortable with effectively 2 ring spanners, and in one case the ratchet one. And because I can't use the torque wrench to really get at any of them, just the odd ones, I have to say they've just been put in blooming tight. You do, after about 5 hours use, you should come and recheck them. That's what it says in the book, and I will be doing that. The other thing is, all of the nuts without exception are on this left hand side. Don't even be tempted, because it's easier to do it on the other side. And one of these, this one in particular, here it is, this first one here, this one is very tight. Just take your time, put the nuts up from the rear side, but don't be tempted to put the nuts on there. The idea is that since this shaft rotates this way, effectively the nuts are trying to tighten themselves up. They're not trying to untighten. And if you've got fresh nuts like I have, and they are proper nylock type nuts, then they should be okay anyway. But when this thing's in full operation and you're sticking big twigs in the other end, you want this to be tight, you want it to be right, you don't want bits to be flying off. Okay, I'm now going to assemble the middle section. I decided I'd work from left to right so that basically the sharp blades are always to my left. I'm left-handed, so that works for me. And then the last one I'm going to put in is this one, and the blades, the bevels will be pointing that way on these. When these are in, I will show you which way the blades are pointing, which should confirm what I told you earlier. So there we are, and on to phase 2, so to speak. Just thought I'd show you my technique for tightening them. This ratchet ring, I'm not quite sure what its proper name is anyway, I've got on the nut, because it's the nut that's going to be moving. It's the nut that's going to be moving. The bolt will pretty much bind up on the face, and then I've got a ring open-ended, but I've got the ring end on the other, and literally pull on this one, push on that one very gently with your gloves on, and you should be okay. And when I finish this row, I'll just show you the angles of the blades to show you that they are in fact, well, hopefully the right way round. Right, that's one row done, and guess who forgot to put his glove on and just nip the last bolt up? That's my blood, unfortunately. Yeah, when you've tightened them, it's worth just going round again just to make sure you haven't missed one. Anyway, let's see if I can just show you how this angle thing works. If we're looking at this one here, that is very slightly pointing that way. So I took the view that this therefore would be pointing towards the axle. This one is more obvious here, definitely pointing towards the axle. And this is where I have to be very careful, because I'm going to rotate this and try not to gash myself. This one here, careful. This one here, look, you can see the angle and it's pointing towards the axle. And this one at the top here, look that way. And then these are all going to be done the same way. And of course the last one, being a section A, they're all going to point, the bevels are all going to point that way, hopefully. So gloves back on for me, tut tut, and no more blood on the carpet. But we're progressing. That's 2 rows down, which is 8, and there's just 12 to go. If you've got one with just 3 sections, you're more than halfway. Right, that's all of those in, except the far right section A. Some things that I noticed on the way: it's worth going round twice when you've tightened them. What seems to be the case is, as you tighten one set, as you pull the metal in, the other sets get squeezed in a little bit. So I would go around twice, checking the nuts, and the facets are all, the bevels are all pointing towards the axle, which means, as far as I'm concerned, they're right. Now, the last section, this one, I've been using this to rotate the assembly as I've been putting the blades in. Now I'm going to be putting the blades in here as well. So from here on in, I've got to be very careful where I grab it, how I rotate it, because this is all sharp. Brand new blades, and there's already a little bit of blood in the system. So this one, the last one, it's got to be done with some care. And I may even put the handle in the right hand side, you remember, goes in there as a way of rotating the system for put the blades in. I'm going to see how I go, and I'll let you know how that went on. I could really do with a good tripod for this system, and I could probably let you see me actually at work, although I have no desire to let you see me cut my finger like I did earlier. So now it's the last section. You will notice all of the nuts facing that way, okay, and that'll be the same for these. And on this last section, the bevels will be pointing that way, and these bevels are already pointing that way. So let's see how we go. 4 more to go, and on with the gloves and a lot of care, because this last section, well, when you put the last one in, there's almost nothing to grab that doesn't have a sharp blade attached. So the potential for a little bit of personal injury is higher than it's been up till now. So we'll see how it goes. Well, there's just one spare nut in the box, and in about 6 languages there's a note from the supplier to remind you to tighten them up after, I think, about 5 hours of use. But here we go. Sorry about that, you should never do that. They're all in, all pointing the right way, all with the nuts to the left. Be fair to say this last one was tricky. I've got my left glove on purely because the angle of this one here was a bit tricky, actually being able to get it in. I had a couple which were a little tighter than I would have liked, and I found that just a little smear of grease sorted it out. The blades that came out were slightly rusty. Let's face it, this thing's used for chopping up bits of trees, so there'll be sap and there'll be moisture. But there we are, so that way's leaning to there, so that's where the bevel is, etc. And the ones on the left pointing that way. That all looks good. I will leave the blood on there as a reminder for next time I do that. That should be it. If you do the second option instead of replacing blades, which is to reverse them, you take the blades out of the left hand, what they call the A section, reverse them 180 degrees and put them in the equivalent position on the right hand section. So that's the way so that face then would be down there, but it would be right. That's what they say. This is a new set, so I guess that'll be the first operation sometime in the future. But for now, I think job done. I don't think there's any necessity to show you putting it all back together. Yes, these, just forgot them the once and I paid the price. Hopefully yours will be as successful as mine. Thanks for watching.